Everyone from Dunrovin Ranch in Loza, Montana. It's a delightful sunny afternoon, and we actually have a live audience of two lovely people and our campers. James, can you turn the camera around and show everybody our live audience? And when he turns it, I can see, and I'll tell you when to wave. Hi, James. I'm waiting for you to turn the camera so our audience can wave. Here it comes, everybody. So I would like to hear everybody say hi. Hi. We have 4 campers and an apprentice worker here who was one of our apprentice students previously, and then we have 2 guests, one of whom I met at the local wine club, and he brought a friend from California. Is that correct? In California? Yeah. At any rate, I'm here today with my lovely lady Loza, and the reason I wanted to share her with you at this time of year is she was born on June 15th. She was born here at Dunrovin, and her life story and the story of Dunrovin Ranch are just so intertwined. It's really hard to talk about one without talking about the other. And I thought I would do a little grooming on her just to show her how much I love her. But let me start with the Dunrovin story. And my great-grandmother moved to Montana in the 1880s. And she and my great-grandfather built a life near Nyhart, Montana, and made a small fortune in gold and silver. He then took my great-grandmother and my grandmother, who had been born by then, back to the Wisconsin-Minnesota border and built a mansion. And then my grandfather proceeded to lose his fortune in a sugar deal in Cuba. And he was so distressed that he abandoned his family. He abandoned my great-grandmother, and she had 13 children, the oldest of which was my grandmother. So, of course, she turned the whole place into a boarding house. So on the banks of the Mississippi River, my great-grandmother ran this boarding house. And as soon as she fledged her last child, she joined her first child, which was my grandmother. And my grandmother had come back to Montana. And so my great-grandmother came back to Montana. Her name was Claire, Grandma Claire, came back to Montana and built a cabin. And she hung up a sign, and the sign said, Dunrovin. I never meant to leave Montana. I'm back to live in Montana. I want to be buried in Montana. And I played in that cabin as a child. So the word Dunrovin meant a great deal to me. I carried it with me throughout my life. And when I, too, returned to Montana and bought this little place along the Bitterroot River, I hung up my sign and I said Dunrovin because in honor of my great-grandmother. Well, the story doesn't stop there. My father died in 2001. And so my mare, Annie, many of whom you knew, was pregnant. And as the time came, my family had a family reunion, so they abandoned ship while I stayed here to help make sure that the birthing process went well, all right? And so on June 15th, my father's birthday, the year after he died, Lady Loza was born. And she was born right here in this very place. She was the first foal I ever had the joy of watching be born or of being a part of her life. And so what I did within the first few moments, I did what's called imprinting. And imprinting is a really important part of making a horse a really good horse around people. So I called a friend to come and hold Annie while I imprinted the foal. And imprinting the foal means you put your hand in its ears, you cover its eyes, you put your hand in its mouth, you put your hand everywhere that a vet might put his hand or her hand. And the foal learns to accept this very willingly. And then the last thing you do is you hold a leg, all legs, each leg. And the minute she stops resisting, you let go. And what the foal learns is the way to get out of a stressful situation is to not fight. Don't fight it. Relax, and then you let go. And so I did that, and I have to admit that the first time I did it on her hind leg, I got kicked in the face and I walked around with a little hoof print on my cheek for some time. But it didn't hurt me badly. So after I did that, I called my mother, and of course my mother was grieving because this was my father's birthday. And I called her very excitedly, and I said, Mom, you're not going to believe what's happened out here, but I've got this beautiful foal, and I want to come and get you. So I drove into Missoula, I got my mother, and we sat down and just enjoyed this brand new life out here at Dunrovin Ranch. And so I turned to my mother and I said, I want to name her after my dad. And my dad's name was William Goodman, and that's not a really good starting point for a foal that's a filly. So I went to his middle name. It's William Lonzo Goodman, and I thought I'll take the word Lonzo and make it a feminine name and call her Lonza, the lovely lady Lonza. Okay, I'm going to circle back now to my great-grandmother, all right? Within months of her being born, and I want you to know this is a Tennessee walking horse, which some people would call a fancy gaited horse. And a gaited horse means that this horse can walk in ways that a non-gaited horse can walk. Most horses have basically 4 ways of going: walk, trot, canter, and gallop. And Tennessee walking horses have what are called intermediate gaits that are very smooth. So lots of people think a gaited horse is, quote, a fancy horse. So I'm in my house months after I have my lovely Lady Lonza, named after my father, my great-grandmother's grandchild, right? And I get this book in the mail from a woman who is a historian in the little town where where Clara, my great-grandmother, had this mansion. And the book was about this mansion, but it really was about my great-grandmother. And I had never seen some of the pictures that were included in this little book that was sent to me. One of my distant relatives got a hold of this book and sent it out to all of the relatives. Anyway, I'm reading this book, and I come to this picture. And here is a picture of my great-grandmother with a fancy gaited horse named Lady and a dog. And I thought, well, this acorn sure didn't roll very far from the tree. I felt like I was channeling my great-grandmother when I named her Lady Lonza after her grandson. So Lady Lonza is just an incredibly important animal to me. She represents my deceased father. My father was the person in our family who loved animals, who brought dogs into our lives, who brought all kinds of animals into our lives, and who taught me that same love of animals. So whenever I'm around animals, I think of my father. And whenever I'm with Lady Lonza, of course, I think of him very much. I mean, it's just like, this is my father in a horse's body. That's just how I feel about this horse. So Lady Lonza, you can see she's a big girl. She's a very big girl. And this colt that you're looking at is what is called Champagne. It's not a Palomino. I know some of you have been watching her foal, Augie, which is a Palomino. A Palomino has a golden fur and a white mane and tail, but she has a lighter than golden. This is called Champagne, and there's a regular registry of champagne colored horses. They're very rare, and they're quite valuable. You're not going to be able to see it right now because we're in the shade, but it's a little bit dappled. It's not uniform. The color's not uniform. And when it shines in the sun, it's just like gold. It's so beautiful. And in her case, she's called an apricot champagne because if you look at her tail, and I think James can focus in on this for a minute, I'll hold it up. that her tail has got a lot of apricot color in it. This nice red streaks. I mean, this is gorgeous hair. And so there are various types of champagne colored horses, but apricot is one of the most uncommon. And she wants her tail back, you can see. I better let go here. It's also on her mane. Her mane has the same kind of dark red fur in it. And her hair is quite short. A lot of the horses have much longer fur than she does, but her fur is kind of short. And there are a couple things I'm really grateful for. One of them is, if you notice, she has black on her muzzle and black around her eyes. And that's a really important part of a horse, because those are the kinds of things that get sunburned. If you have a horse with a pink nose and pink eyes, they're very susceptible to burns and then cancer from the sun. So I was really relieved when she came out with this nice black muzzle and black around her eyes. She has the most beautiful eyelids, by the way, and eyelashes. They're just beautiful golden. So as you all know, grooming is a two-part process, and you use a curry comb to bring the dirt up from the right next to the skin, and then you use a brush to take that dirt and flick it off. And that's kind of a two-step process. I think that Kelly next week will be going through how to groom a horse properly, but you always want to groom a horse before you ride it. But grooming is also something they really love to do for each other. If you leave a horse out in the pasture, what you will see is two horses standing head to head, and they, if they're friends, or if they're a mother-son or mother-daughter, you will see them biting each other at what they call the withers. And I tell people who are around horses, don't ever pat a horse. A horse can't pat another horse. A horse likes to be scratched, and they love to be scratched right at the withers, because that's where their mother scratched them. They love being scratched, but they don't like being patted, because there's nothing in their world that is anything akin to our going up and patting them. So if you want to give a horse some love and affection, grooming is very good, because it sort of stimulates the same thing that their mothers and their friends do, use their teeth to give them a good grooming. And you'll see them biting each other and to, you know, take things off of each other's skin. And very, very many times you'll see horses head to head self-grooming, you know, where they're mutual grooming, where they're both biting each other right at the top of the withers. The withers are the highest part of the back. It's where the shoulder comes together, okay? So don't pat a horse, scratch it, and if you really want to get to know a horse, scratch it where its mother would normally scratch. So I want to tell you some more stories about this gal. She is now 17 years old, and many of you have been watching our web cameras, and you've been watching Kelly learned to train a horse with Brandon Carpenter. And I need to tell you how I met Brandon Carpenter, and that Brandon is the person that I worked with to train this horse. I met Brandon at a clinic. I had a horse, his name was Power, and he was a big, kind of an unruly horse, and I was about to get kicked out because I couldn't keep my horse in good behavior. And someone said, well, go talk to Brandon. He's a really good horse trainer. So I took my horse over to Brandon and I said, can you help me with this horse? And of course I wasn't paying him or anything, and he was just fabulous. He spent about 45 minutes with me and really helped me get that horse calmed down, and we spent the whole rest of the weekend in the clinic and without a problem. So when Lady Loza was born, I called up Brandon, and as many as you know, of you already know, he lives 450 miles east of here. And I asked him if I could come with my horse and have him train her, but train me in the process as well. And that is exactly what I did as a 3-year-old. You know, horses, you'll see race horses that are run as 2- and 3-year-olds. That's way too early. I mean, horses' backs, don't even fuse until later than that. So riding a horse vigorously as a 2 or 3-year-old is not a very good thing to do. So he started her as a 3-year-old, and we rode her very, very lightly for the next couple of years. But my first trail ride was with Brandon in the mountains south of Billings, Montana. It was a delightful ride, and Lady Loza did just beautifully, just did really, really well. So I brought her back, and the next summer I started riding her daily, and we started hitting the trails. And then I was on a trail up in the Lolo National Forest when she and I were crossing a bridge, and the bridge collapsed. So both she and I went right straight down into a creek. And neither of us were badly hurt, but she was very, very frightened by the experience, as was I. Luckily, neither one of us were hurt, and I got her out of there and got back on her, and we continued our ride. But to this day, horses remember these things. And the first bridge that she comes to, every year it's the same story. She stops. She doesn't want to cross a bridge. She doesn't trust bridges. And so I tell people that ride her other than me, don't try to force her over that bridge. I always get off, walk her across and walk her back, walk her across and get back on and ride across. And then she begins to start trusting again. But that picture of falling through that bridge is very much cemented in her mind. And because of her beautiful color, I decided that I would breed her. So I had, she's had 3 foals. 2 of them were fillies. One of them, unfortunately, met a very bad fate here on my ranch. She was shot and was killed right here on our ranch. And we have no idea who the person was. We certainly tried to find out, but we could not find out. And that horse was a beautiful little horse. We called it Sona or Sona. I called it Stormy, and a woman who wanted it bought it and called it Sona. It met a tragic end. It was really sad. And then she had another filly. Her second foal was a filly. And that filly was born when I had this wonderful ranch manager. He was from Romania, and his name was Daniel, and just a lovely, lovely man, and he had a lovely wife, and he was an incredible worker. I so loved riding with Daniel. He would go out and clear trails with me, and this guy was a great rider, and so I gave him that horse. And he raised her here at the ranch until they moved, and he still has that horse. That horse is in Helena, where they live now, and that horse has had a foal of her own. So now Lady Loza is a grandmother. And her third foal, of course, is the one that you see here now, and that's Augie. And for those of you who were not with me when Augie was born, his real name is Ozzy's Golden Echo. Ozzy after our bird, our male bird that died here. We wanted to honor him with a name, Ozzy's Golden Echo, and my son suggested shortening it to Augie. So that's the Palomino that you see out there in the fields. So, James, first of all, do you have are there any questions? If there are any questions from people, you can step outside and ask me, because she's a really great horse. I've had many, many adventures with this horse, and I know that some of you have been here during our equine art extravaganza, where people paint on the horses, and she makes a fabulous artistic canvas because of her beautiful fur. People love painting on her fur. I'm going to move her over to this other side, in part because I would like to show you her brand, and I want to show you how that's made as well. Come here. There you go, gal. Okay, I think James will be able to bring this right up in the camera. Let me get back a little ways, Lonza. Okay, her brand is right here. And to have a brand, you have to register it with the Montana Department of Livestock. Every ranch has its own brand. And mine stands for Dunrovin, of course. And what this is, it's a lazy D. The D is down, it's laying down, with what's called a hanging R, Dunrovin. So this is a right shoulder equine brand. It's on her right shoulder. And let me show you the branding iron that was used to make this brand. And this is the branding iron. I'll show it to you how it went right on her like this. Okay, I'll hold this there for a minute, James, so you can get a good view of it. And the way we brand our horses, it does not hurt them at all. We use what are called freeze brands. So what happens is the vet comes out, and the vet gives her a slight anesthetic to make her, so things won't hurt her. It just makes her a little bit happy. She's not out or anything like that. And then you shave the fur, and then you put this into liquid nitrogen. You get it really, really cold, freezing cold. And you apply, it's important to apply even pressure on the muscle right there. And what it does is it kills the color in the hair follicles. So the brand grows back without the color. And you can see this brand from some distance. Now, the reason it's important to brand an animal is if you ever take an animal into the backcountry and it gets loose, and that happens more often than you think it might. You go back into the Bob Marshall Wilderness area for about 10 days and something happens and the animal gets loose. Well, if your animal is loose in the Bob Marshall, you really want to find that animal because it's a tough place for a domestic horse to live. I mean, some horses do survive it, but not many do. So you want to make sure you find your animal, and anybody who finds this animal, another person, another guide outfitter or something of that sort, would look and see that this is a branded animal, and they could find me just instantly by calling the brand office and telling them that it's a lazy D with a hanging R on the right shoulder, and they can look it up instantly and find me. And yes, can you turn the camera? Come on up here and ask your question so people can hear you. Come on. Yeah, just come on up here so people know the question. Yeah.
Why wouldn't you chip the animal as well?
Here?
Chip.
Yeah. Chips don't work nearly as well. Oh. And for one thing, you have to have a chip reader. She looks like she wants some water. And not many people do have a chip reader. And you won't know that the horse is chipped. Whereas a horse with a brand, everybody knows it has an owner. And you can't sell it at the livestock markets. You couldn't sell, nobody could transport this horse across state lines because without a brand inspection. So a brand is a very visible thing, and we have a whole system in place that protects horses that have been branded. It's a much better method than the chip because you have to have the right equipment. And if somebody were to drive down here and think, oh, that's a pretty horse, I think I'll steal that horse, they couldn't get away with it, and they know they couldn't because it's branded.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. That's a good question, by the way. Okay. All right, come on, Loza. She wants a drink, and I guess I'll just let her have it. Anyway, I also want to shout out a special hello to Vernie. Hi, Vernie. I saw you this morning, and I told you I was going to give you a special shout out, so here you are. We have another question, I bet.
Yeah, two questions. One is, where did she get her champagne color from?
Okay, and, that's a good question.
Is it hair or fur?
A good question. Both good questions. Does everybody know that you got these questions, James? Okay, the two questions were, where did she get her champagne color from? Well, that's a really good question, and it has its own story, of course. I bought her mother, Annie, when I first moved to Montana. And when I bought Annie, she had a gorgeous colt with a champagne colored, just like a Lady Loza. Beautiful colt. And I bought Annie for an endurance horse, and that means long distance riding. But I had Annie, this is before I had this land all set up for horses. She was in a pasture with 4 other horses, and a huge big hailstorm came through. And Annie got kicked in the knee or ran into a tree. I don't have any idea what happened to her, but her knee became compromised. And so I had her operated on twice, but she fell with me 3 times. And I knew that she would never be ridden again after the 3rd fall, that it was just not going to happen. But then I remembered that beautiful colt that she had. So I called the people that I bought Annie from, and I said, where did that stud come that produced that beautiful colt? And can I talk to the owner of the colt? When you breed horses, you're going to realize that many of the characteristics come from the stud, and including behavioral characteristics. So one thing you want to do is you want to talk to people who have a foal that's out of that combination, that mare with that stud. And so I called the people who bought that colt and asked about him. And they just gave him rave reviews as being a really good, strong horse with a good mind. So I decided that I would breed Annie to the same stud. Well, of course, that stud lived in California, all the way in California. So I had to go to what's called artificial insemination. And let me tell you, that was an ordeal. They'd have to collect the semen and send it up by air. I'd drive to the airport, and I'd come out to the vet and bring Annie to the vet, and he would inseminate her. And then 2 weeks later, I would have her sonogram to see if she was pregnant. Well, she didn't take the first time. She didn't take the 3rd time. She didn't take the 4th time, but the 5th time she did. And I thought, yahoo, Annie's pregnant. And that was with Lady Loza. So it really comes from her stud. Her father was named Golden Aryan. The other question that I was asked is whether this is called fur or hair. And the truth of the matter is, the coat is called fur, but it's hair on the mane and the tail. Generally, you refer to the hair of the mane and the tail, but the fur on the body of the animal. Do you have any other questions? She's a great, wonderful big horse. In fact, for going across the river, you can't beat this horse. You don't have to pick your feet up. She's so tall that you can get across the river very easily. She, is such a tall, big horse, and a very strong, powerful horse, but a good horse, a real kind horse, except, as you know, to other male horses. She doesn't like the geldings at all, and she'll kick at them. In fact, when I have ridden her in a string in the back country, I either ride in front or way behind, because the other horses don't want to get too near her, because they are afraid of being kicked by her. And she will kick out at another horse, but not at another person. Any other questions, James? Any here? You kids have any? Any questions? Well, thank you all for coming and for sharing my beautiful champagne-colored mare. 17 is getting up there for a horse. It's not old, it's young old. Yes, here's a question. You want to come up here and ask me? Come on. Well, I can't hear you from clear back there. Maybe you could give us your name while you're asking your question. What's your name?
Caitlin.
Caitlin?
Baby Loza had Augie.
Pardon?
Augie?
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's her mother. That's his mother. This is Augie's mother. Yes. Yeah. Have you seen Augie? You like Augie? Yeah. Do you want to brush this horse for a minute?
Sure.
Come on over here. Come on the gate over here. You can all take turns if you want to. She's very kind. That's a heavy gate, isn't it? You guys can come here. If you want to get some brushes, she's here. Let me get it for you. Let me get the brush for you.
Can I pet her?
Hang on.
Can I pet her?
Yeah, you can pet her. Whoops.
fine, you're
Oops.
fine.
Okay. Just don't walk under her, all right?
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, you know what to do, don't you?
Yep.
Okay. Put that around your neck so you don't lose it. All right. Well, she's going to get some loving up here. She's going to love this. Yeah, that's good.
It's kind of hard for me.
She's a big horse, isn't she? Yeah. See, she likes that. Yeah. And if she picks her feet up, it's just because she's got a bug or something. Yeah. Yep. Okay, you want to go on the other side? One of you, two of you on the one side and two on the other. That's right. Notice how you went around the horse. What's the best way to go around a horse? Either far or close, one or the other. Here, hold. Here, let me show you. I'll show you. Hang on to this for a minute. Just hang it. Just, okay. If you go close and she knows you're there, you're touching her, even if she picked up and kicked, you're too close to get at the end of her leg. You're not going to get hurt very much. So you can walk around her. For one thing, she knows you're here. It's either that or you go way far. What you don't want to do is walk where she could kick you with full force. But she's not going to kick anybody. She likes kids. And that picking up her legs is just, you know, fighting the bugs. Okay. Well, I'm going to sign off. James can keep the camera on here if these kids are going to groom her for a minute. But I want to thank you all for joining me. And I hope you'll be back on Thursday at 2 o'clock. We have two things happening on Thursday. We will plant a tree to commemorate the passing of Bonnie and Clyde. And we will have a training session with Lady Lanza's foal, Augie. So come back Thursday at 2 o'clock and we hope to see you then. Thank you very much for coming. Bye.